Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Microsoft Flight Simulator, and in this episode we are taking a new look at the FlightSim.com CLS 60 Force Feedback Yoke. Both the yoke firmware and the application have received massive updates since the last time I did a video on this, and I figured that given the release of the Moza Force Feedback Yoke, might be time to bring this one back into the light so you guys can make a decision for your purchases if you decide to go this route. So stick around. If you are interested in any of my tutorial guides for Microsoft Flight Simulator, or simply interested in supporting the channel, consider joining me on Patreon. Patreon subscribers level tier 2 and above have access to all of my guides as well as any future guides that come down the road. Patreon link can be found in the description below. Alright folks, so as I said, the CLS 60 FlightSim.com Force Feedback Yoke has gone through some very large updates since I last did a video on it. Autopilot has been refined, overall force feedback has been refined, and as you guys can see, the software, if you remember what it looked like before, has gone through a very significant change. Complete different UI now, much easier if you're on the latest version to do firmware updates. You can see the connectivity of the software is significantly different now. The overall layout of the software itself is much easier to navigate. You get much more information in a cleaner, much easier to manage manner. Now, for the most part, we're leaving everything just about as default can be. I'm going to go ahead and turn turbulence on though. Autopilot and trim, we're going to leave everything as default as we can, turning on a few things here. Software trim, I don't want that, I want the hardware trim. So what that means is that when I hit the trim switch, it's actually going to trim the device and not the sim. So the reason why I want that is because then you're going to get that aspect of real world. If I'm having to pull this much pressure back in order to hold the stick, I can trim it until I no longer have to hold it with my fingers, right? Or at least until you're only holding minor force. We have the yoke physics, you have your stall warnings and data there. I mean, there's just tons. Dynamic force, engine vibration, ground vibration, grip settings. So here's your trim settings. I am going to kick these down just a little bit. I do like them a little bit lower. And this just is the value. The higher the number, the more trim will be implemented when you go to tap your trim switch. So I don't want that to be too high. I like to have it at a more sort of subtle. I'd rather hold the button longer or push it more times depending on what I'm doing than, you know, have a very large judgment or action that I can't control easily. So let's go ahead and go for a flight. What we're going to do is we're going to do a quick takeoff around Tucson, do a quick pattern. We're going to turn on the autopilot so you guys can see how the autopilot syncs up with the yoke. You'll actually watch as we change heading. The yoke will actually change positions based on the aircraft as it would in the real world. So let's get this window off the screen so you guys can see everything in action, and let's do this here. Alright, so inside the simulator, I don't know why it kicked me off. That was really weird. I started on the runway and it started me at this like kickoff. It was really weird. It set me down and the whole nose started to rotate. And this is Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. I did notice that's something that's happened since I installed Chaseplane, but I also need to update Chaseplane, so maybe that was something that was resolved. It's not a huge deal. I mean, honestly, even if the sim didn't do it, I probably would. Alright, let's get those lights off though. I don't like that. Let's go ahead and turn the yoke back on. I'm going to try to set myself back a little bit further so you guys can see it. Alright, I am in a sort of a goofy sitting situation, so if I fly like crap or you see my arm coming up in the way of the throttle here, my bad. Let me get SPAD started and we'll fly. Alright, so let's go ahead and get ourselves airborne now. I went ahead and restarted it. The sim was being a little weird, so. Alright, so here we go. Feet on the pedal. And watch as the yoke begins to come back as we start getting airflow under the surface. There it comes. Whoa. Whoa, rudders. Whoa, rudders. There we go. Why are you so all over the road? I'm not quite sure what the hell is happening here. But hey, we're airborne. What is happening? Alright, that was the third time that I've tried to do this with this aircraft, and live weather is just doing something really silly, so we turned it off. So we probably won't get much of the turbulence feeling today, but let's talk about the rest of it. So I'm going to give you guys right out of the bat here, probably the biggest part that you're all wanting to know. Right now, yes, I'm going to absolutely say that the CLS 60 experience is better than the Moza. Now, I do believe Moza is going to get there. I want to make that very, very clear. Moza is obviously new. The CLS 60 has had quite a bit of time to mature and grow. It's been out for over a year now, so I want to keep that in mind, that that's obviously a very significant factor that needs to be taken into consideration. The CLS 60 is also significantly bigger than the Moza, so that's another thing that you want to be thinking about as well. The CLS 60 has a permanent yoke. We know that Moza's yoke is detachable and purchased separately, which means the doors are very likely open to the idea that there are going to be other add-on yokes that will be available later on, where this one, this is it, this is what you get. Okay, so be thinking about that as well. The Moza yoke has more buttons, more features on it, so it gives you further expansion and capability for the various different types of aircraft that you may want to fly with that particular hardware. So now getting back to the CLS 60, the pros of it. Again, because of its maturity, keeping that in mind through this whole thing, please keep in mind this thing has had time to mature in both firmware and software. That's a really key factor that you need to take into consideration and ask yourself if you're willing to let Moza, which is the really big competitor when it comes to the price point, give Moza a chance to grow and mature. So with that in mind, the CLS 60's actions are far smoother, far more natural feeling in comparison to the Moza. Now with the Moza you can get pretty close by tweaking the software, but it doesn't come without its growing pains. It takes quite a bit of time to really dial the software in. This is its current configuration straight out of the box, and it already has an extremely natural feel to it. The tension and inertial feedback required on the yoke in order to make an action feels very mechanical, feels very natural, feels like you are actually adjusting control surfaces, right? But it doesn't feel clunky and choppy like it does in some of the other situations. The hardware trim is obviously functioning straight out of the box already, and that's something that's I believe is still not available in the Moza force feedback. It's really weird. When I first did the Moza force feedback video, my hardware trim was working. When I updated the firmware, it broke. So I'm not quite sure what was going on there, but something was making it work. But anyway, I digress. So coming into the trim action, I really like the trim customizations. You can really dial the trim into what you want, and you can adjust each button or each directional axis as you choose. Being able to increase the trim that is delivered on, elevators down versus elevator up, if that's something that you prefer. I obviously want them to have the same control. I want to know that I'm going to get the same response in either direction. But as you can see in the hardware trim, you can actually visually watch the yoke move. Okay, so that's a big kicker for me. I really prefer the hardware trim. It does require quite a bit of dialing it in to get it to where you want it to be. As you guys can see, that was a pretty significant move forward when I did that. So again, that's a growing pain. That's one of those things that you have to be willing to put the time and effort in. And this is going to be the same with either product. You have to be willing to put the time and effort in to get the settings to where you want. And that's what I can tell you right now, that's with any force feedback piece of equipment. Even with the force feedback fly stick, the AB9 from Moza, it's the same thing. You have to be willing to put in the effort and the time and be expecting, quite a lot of scenarios before you get it where you want it. Okay, now let's go ahead and check out the autopilot so you guys can see that in action as well. Oops. So there's the autopilot turned on. You can see the yoke beginning to move. Our heading is right about due north here. If we give it a turn, let's set it due east. You can see the yoke responding to the same manner in which it is in the aircraft. It's just returned to center. It's center in the aircraft now as well. We'll let that turn. Now it's leveling out the wings. So that's a really awesome feature as well. It's something simple, but it's something that really does bring a lot. It's another one of those very big immersion enhancers, because you need to be able to feel and see what you're expecting to feel and see. So that's a huge thing, believe it or not. As simple as of a task as that is, quote unquote simple. I'm no coder, that I couldn't make it do that. That's for damn sure. But as small of a feature, I guess, if you will, in comparison to what you need to get from a force feedback anything, especially at the price point that these things are at. I believe this thing's sitting right around $800 to $900 if I'm not mistaken. Could be a little more. That's obviously a big kicker, right? And every little bit makes a difference. So you've got the hardware trim that's functioning on this. It's really a cool feeling as you're sitting here pulling back. You know, when you're in a situation where you're pulling back, the trim is probably one of my biggest pros to using a force feedback hardware is trim, because you can feel it. You can feel what the aircraft is wanting to do. You're pulling, you start trimming, and you find that your fingers are starting to relax. You get to start doing this before you find yourself to where you're here, and you're just sort of holding it gently, you know what I mean? And it's the same thing going down. If you're constantly, or if you need to go down, if you're constantly having to push, you just start trimming until you get to the descent angle you want, and you can feel it. You can feel the weight come off your hand, and it's a really, really neat experience. It really is quite impressive the way that they've done things. So I will definitely say that right now the CLS 60 is king when it comes to performance. Again, I'm going to keep stressing this point, guys. I know I'm a broken record at this point, but I keep stressing that it's had time to mature. This has had time to mature, and then that's an important piece to remember. So don't just go rush out and go for the CLS 60. Make sure you do your weights and balances. There's a lot of pros and cons between these two. But if you're not someone who wants to wait for the growing pains, and that's something to to absolutely think about. But let's go ahead and start turning us back around. There's the yoke in action once again. It really is a lot of fun playing around with this. The software change that they made here is fantastic. They've done such a great job with this. This looks so much cleaner and so much nicer than what it was before. And the firmware update is so much easier now. You still have to download the firmware manually, but the process of doing it is simple. I almost not going to go through it, but you would simply click this. You tell it to go into boot mode. It tells you to relaunch the software. You close the software, you relaunch it. When you relaunch it, you come back on this menu. It says load firmware. You click the load firmware. You select it from whatever directory it's in. It loads it. Then you hit start update, rinse and repeat, and you're done. So it was a very, very simple way of doing this. I really like it. The profile customization options, once you set it to where you want, you can save it, you can import, you can export. So if you know someone else who's got one, or maybe there's a specific aircraft that you found, you have those options as well. As you guys can see here, we've got things turned down quite a bit. I'm actually going to turn the inertia up a little bit, just to sort of see what we get here. Now on the roll settings, I do actually want it up a little higher, not much. Turbulence, turbulence got disabled. That's interesting. Let's go ahead and bring that up a bit, even though we're not going to experience any turbulence because we have live weather turned off. But anyway, autopilot and trim, yoke synchronization. It's interesting that I'm not quite sure what that does now, given the fact that we just watched it move. But whatever. Software trim is disabled. Hardware trim. Enable hardware trim on the ground. That's what that is. I kind of like that actually. Why not? Let's check it out. Yoke physics. Sort of walk through any of these settings, see what I want. And the stall warning. Let's go ahead and do a stall here in a minute. And we'll see what we get back. Looks pretty good. So apply. Alright, back in the sim. Let's disable that autopilot now. And I'm not the best with practicing stalls, but we're going to try it at a very low altitude that I should not be at. There's that yoke synchronization, I think. Okay, so actually, I don't like that. That is very, very hard. So you know what? I think we'll go back in and turn that off. So that's probably why that was set to 0, huh? So let's just kick that right back down. And even on that, that was very tough on the pitch. So let's bring that back down. Alright, autopilot's off. Alright, that's better. Yeah, probably keep it where it was. So we're going to go up. Doing a terrible job at keeping wings level. And it's sitting there. There's the buffet. You can feel it in the yoke. That was really actually kind of cool. Let me turn that window off again. Let's do that one more time here. See if I can actually pretend like I know how to keep the wings level on a stall. Left wing dipped first. But it's awesome because when the wing drops, you can feel it in the yoke. The yoke literally goes limp like a limp noodle on one side. It's a very weird sensation. When the stall dropped, all right, so I'm holding here and I'm sort of trying to hold it to the right, trying to keep that right wing level because I knew the left wing was going to dip. I knew that I was going to do it again. I suck at this, as you guys can tell, but it was really interesting because as the left wing dropped, gosh, speak. English, man, English. Anyway, it was like I could feel it. Like, I don't even know how to describe it, but it was I knew by the feeling in my hand, and that's why I said it, I knew that left wing was going to drop again. It was a really cool sensation, and that was right during the buffet. Now let's go ahead and bring it in for a landing, and we can see what that's all about. So like here we're in the climb, so I'm going to add some trim. Now normally I would obviously have the throttle on this side. I've got the Bravo right here because we're going to be doing another video probably later on today. And so we're flying with the Bravo, and I'm obviously flying from the first officer, or the right seat if you will. Ta-ta! Monster! Strawberry again today, by the way. Alright, start pulling that power off. Now you can see she's already dipping down a little bit. Let's trim it up. Alright, we're getting close to our turn, so I'm going to start trimming nose down here. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. I did not calibrate this thing. It's real funny too, or weird I guess. Increase the power and you can feel that instantly in the yoke. Reduce the power and you can feel everything change. So right now I'm pulling way back on it, so let's start trimming aft. There we go, that's better. Left wing really wants to drop. Again, that's my fault. I forgot to calibrate this thing in Windows, so I'm sure it's got me leaning to the left side. Listing lazily to the left. Whoa, good move. Let's go more flaps. Having to pull back a lot, so I'm going to keep trimming aft. There we go, that pressure was released. It's definitely a lot easier to get trimmed up and configured for landing. Stabilized, if you will. Sort of. Not that I am an example that anybody should use, but you guys get the gist of what I'm getting at here, I hope. Excuse me. Let's pretend for a second that I remotely know how to keep this thing on center line. Let's add some power. And again, even the throttle, the engine power, you can feel it. So you really start to get an idea of what the aircraft's going to do. Like it gets significantly busier, obviously at slow speeds. Hold it. And then as we slow the aircraft down, we're going to watch the yoke go all the way to the nose, or all the way to the firewall. So a very, very cool experience and a very, very massive improvement in the hardware and the software. Well, I guess the hardware hasn't changed. The firmware and the software since the last time I did a review of this particular product. FlightSim.com, you guys are doing an amazing job with this. This is fantastic. I can't wait to tweak this thing a bit more. I'm going to keep diving into it. I'm going to finish up those calibrations, definitely get that done. But anyways, as always, guys, I hope you guys found the video useful. Hope it gave you some things to think about. When it comes to force feedback, if you're interested, don't rush in your purchase, guys. Do your research, really look into it, and really remember that it does not matter who you buy from. There's going to be a lot of legwork involved in getting force feedback the way you want it. There's a lot of tweaking. You guys saw the screenshots or on the screen of all the different settings and all the different variables that have to be considered when going into getting the optimum or optimal force feedback experience. I tend to be more on the lazy side of things, but even with the default settings, it's a definite game changer. There's no ands, if, or buts about it. The immersive experience is significantly changed, and I'll tell you that it's even more impressive when you're inside of virtual reality. Get yourself into something like the Pimax Crystal, and it's a whole different ball game. But anyways, as always, guys, stay safe and healthy. Link to this product will be down in the description below. I'll see you in the next one.